What you are hearing now is the Drover's Dream, but you're not. But you will, I promise you. Welcome everyone to the early years of the Bush Music Club. Do we have that track of the Drover's Dream there, please? And we'll just have a listen to that as an intro.
Oh, that's good.
One night while roving sheep, my companions lay asleep. There was not the stars to illuminate the sky. I was dreaming, I suppose, for my eyes were nearly closed, when a very strange procession passed me by. First there came a kangaroo, with his flag and blanket blue. A dingo ran beside him for a...
And the dulcet tones of Alan Scott leading the Bushwhackers there in vocals, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But hello everyone!
Hello.
What an amazing ensemble we have here. And this is all about the early years of the Bush Music Club. In 1954, most of you remember 1954, do you? Okay. The Bushwhackers, the original Bushwhackers, were very, very busy. And it was their passion to get this music out to as many people as possible. And several of them formed the Bush Music Club. Now I use that word passionate, and I say it again. All good left wingers? Okay. Who had concerns about the preservation and the dissemination of the culture of Australia. And that's what they did. They got it all together and they started this wonderful Bush Music Club. The oldest folk club in Australia and the second, I believe, in the world. What I know. And it's, of course, we're going to be in a couple of years, the 60th anniversary of the Bush Music Club. They had publications, no money, but that fire in the belly, which we all need, don't we? Yeah, thank you. The fire in the belly to do this. And they were doing it through various means, through publication, through performance, the Bushwhackers and the other groups that formed, and getting this music out, this Australian music out. And that was it. What you heard there was the first Australian hit, I believe. 1956, the Bushwhackers made The Drover's Dream. It was done on Wattle Records. Wattle Records was formed in 1954. I think Alex Wood is here, a good friend of Alex's, Peter Hamilton, who actually started the Sydney University Film Festival in the 40s, which turned into the Sydney Film Festival in later years. Now, Peter was a man of sight, and he and his good friend Edgar Waters formed Wattle Records and produced a whole lot of material. There was indigenous material. There was the contemporary folk singers of the day. And Wattle Records, I have emblazoned on my chest Chlöe, which is National Library search engine. Look up Wattle Records on Chlöe. I'll leave you with the members of the Bush Music Club and we'll talk about the early years. Thank you.
Now still down Reedy River, the grassy shield sky, the water holds still mirror the pictures in the sky. The golden sand is drifting across the rocky walls, and over goes Scotland's so brightest world.
Everybody, my name's Sharyn, and just to tell you a little bit about Reedy River. Reedy River was Australia's first folk musical. The show premiered in Melbourne in 1953 and ran for a season of 6 weeks. Then in December 53, the Sydney New Theatre did a production, replaced the orchestra with the Bushwhackers, and they ran for 9 months. One of the most powerful songs in the show is the ballad of 1891, and I would ask the Sydney Trade Union Choir to please come forward and give us the ballad of 1891. And for the rest of you, I would ask you, please, if you would stand, because it was traditional during the show when this song was sung, everyone in the theatre would stand. So I would ask you to please stand. Thank you.
said the shearers, they may not be so keen. We can mount 3,000 horsemen to show them what we mean. Then we'll pack the west with troopers from Burke to Charters Towers. You can have your fill of speeches, but the final strength is ours. Be damned to your 6 shooters, your troopers and police. The sheep are getting heavy, the burridge in the fleece. Then if Nordenfelt and Gatling won't bring you to your knees, we'll find a Lord the squad set that's made for times like these. To trial at Rockhampton, the 40 men were brought. The judge had got his orders, the squatters on the court, but for everyone was sentenced, 1,000 won't forget. When they jail a man for striking, it's a rich man's country, yes.
Absolutely stirring, wonderful. Thank you very much, Sydney Trade Union Choir. Sylvia Salisbury, who was singing with the choir just then, was one of the original cast members of the Sydney production of Reedy River. I'd like you to please welcome Sylvia to the stage to tell us more about this.
In 1947, my father took me, a child of 12, to see my first play at the New Theatre, then at 167 Castlereagh Street, Sydney. This was a small amateur group performing plays on a repertory basis since 1932, covering a wide range of plays from Shaw to Shakespeare, Cliffordettes to Arthur Miller, topical political reviews, parodied versions of Gilbert and Sullivan, plays with a political or social theme or message, plays with a working class bias, plays dealing with racism, social justice and peace in the world. They encouraged and supported Australian playwrights. In 1952, as a starry-eyed teenager, I joined the New Theatre and was keen for any walk-on part. Then in 1953, there was a buzz in the theatre. They were going to do a production of Reedy River by Dick Diamond. This had been done earlier in the year in Melbourne to great success. This musical, based around the shearers' strike of 1891, used Australian folk songs, bush songs, songs composed in the bush tradition, and was the right play at the right time. There was an awakening of interest in our past, particularly the rural life of Australian workers, and the songs of the show expressed and captured that life so vividly. Reedy River required many actors, singers, dancers, and a new type of orchestra. This was supplied with a bushwhackers band with its lagerphone and bush bass. I do not know whether Reedy River made the bushwhackers band or the other way around, but I do know that my love of Australian bush songs started with being in that first production of Reedy River. I was a city suburban girl from a Celtic Anglo background, singing English and Irish songs of my parents, with no knowledge that there were any Australian songs, except for the occasional radio broadcast of songs from the war, such as There's a Brown Slouch Hat with the Side Turned Up and The Road to Gundagai. So these bush songs from Reedy River grounded my youthful psyche to Australia, and not to the strong but nevertheless second-hand distant culture of my parents. The opening night of Reedy River was abuzz with excitement, not nerves, for we knew we had a success on our hands. The foyer was decorated with the wonderful reproductions of the Holterman collection of photos of the goldfields of the 1870s, whose negatives on glass had recently been discovered. The usual run of a show at New Theatre in those days was 8 to 10 weeks, but Reedy River, with its theme and songs, struck such a chord with the people who came to see it, and the strength of word-of-mouth publicity, that the season was extended to 9 months, with change of cast and extra performances added. Even when the season ended at the New, the cast and crew were kept busy taking the show to school halls and out to suburban areas and to Newcastle Trades Hall. I graduated from chorus singer to playing the female lead of Mary opposite Milton Moore's Joe's Collins. 10 years later, I again played Mary opposite Barnett in a new production of Reedy River, and I think I brought deeper understanding to the role and the songs, as in the intervening years, my husband and I joined the Bush Music Club and often performed at their sing-out nights. Here I also worked with Chris Kempster, who set the Lawson poem Reedy River to music when he was only 16, and who played the part of Snowy in that 1953-54 production. It was at the Bush Music Club that I learned more Australian bush songs and came to appreciate the great work done by John Meredith and Duke Tritton in collecting and saving from oblivion the songs from shearers and drovers. There weren't many songs for a woman's point of view, but young men such as Chris Kempster and Mike Claydon were setting the poems of Lawson and other Australian poets to music, and John Dengate was writing his own satirical words, traditional tunes, and although not truly bush songs, they were great songs and great to sing. By 1964, I had 3 children, and it was great to be able to bring them to the sing-about nights held in the Building Workers Industrial Union's building in George Street, Sydney. And I remember hot summer evenings with the upstairs windows open and hoping that if I was singing a quiet, sad song, that the orange-clad Hare Krishna group would not go banging and jingling their way up George Street on a noisy Saturday night. Those nights of singing and dancing were great. We could take the kids with us, no need to organise babysitters, and they would join in the dances with the kindly teenagers and older people helping them to learn the steps and guiding them down the line of dances. Arising out of those sing-about nights, one could learn how to become a performer and try out new songs to an understanding audience. Through this experience, I teamed up with Chris Kempster and we sang anti-war songs at Save Our Songs rallies during the Vietnam War. We sang at folk clubs, Lawson festivals and peace rallies. One memorable night, we performed Australian songs to a huge crowd at the Rushcutters Bay Stadium to visiting Chinese officials, long before China had been recognised by our government. And a very youthful Galpalil performed his amazing kangaroo dance. We sang at the unfinished Chalburn Castle at Cremorne to Pete Seeger on his first visit to Australia to give him a taste of Australian songs. And it was here that a young Jeannie Lewis sang the Queensland version of Waltzing Matilda. And she burst into tears out of nerves, and to think of what an incredible performer she developed in later years, it's hard to imagine. Through my background at Reedy River and the Bush Music Club, I was part of a series of short films being made by the filmmakers of the Waterside Workers Federation, Keith Gow, Jock Levy and Norm Disher. Keith Gow was co-director of the 1953-54 production of Reedy River, and Norma was the costume maker for the productions of Reedy River I was in. These short films used Australian songs sung by Alex Hood as a background to the film version of the songs. The films were screened on the ABC as fillers when programs finished early due to the ABC not having ads. And these films were also accepted at the Sydney Film Festival. Now, in my late 70s, some things have come full circle. With an ageing voice, but my love of songs and singing still intact, choral singing suits me perfectly. And with my new theatre philosophy formed in my youth of art being used for a wider purpose than just self-expression, I joined the Sydney Trade Union Choir. And who should be there but Paula Brock, a founding member of the choir and a singer in that 1953-54 Reedy River production. And who should be the musical director of the choir but Tom Bridges, the son of Doreen Bridges, who wrote the music for the Ballad of 1891, one of the most stirring songs from Reedy River. Tom also played the violin in one of the productions of Reedy River. Now our present musical director is Margaret McLaughlin, the daughter of Cedric McLaughlin, who played the swaggy in Reedy River, and whose moving singing of My Old Black Billy still rings in my memory. And one of Sydney Trade Union's favourite songs is 4 Strong Women, about 4 British peace activists. was written by Murray Maher, the nephew of Pat Barnett, who played Joe Collins in the 1964 Reedy River with me. It is not only the time spent in Reedy River and the learning and performing of songs for the Bush Music Club sing-abouts that one remembers, but the almost 60 years of pleasure and purpose which sprang out of that twin birth of New Theatre's Reedy River and the Bush Music Club. And for this I give them my heartfelt thanks, my well-being, and my best wishes for the future of both of them. Thank you.
Sylvia, that was wonderful, wonderful reminiscences. I'm going to ask someone else to come and have a few words, and that's Alex Hood. Alex was also in the production of the Reedy River. Is Alex here? Well, here he is. Please put your hands together and welcome Alex.
Thank you. Well, I was involved in the early days, and I was invited to join the Bushwhackers while we were in Reedy River. I actually muzzled my way into that show by turning up every day. And they'd say, no, there's nothing for you to do here. And Eddie Allison said, I'll let him come in and help me with the sets. So I started like that, and I was backstage, and then one day someone didn't turn up. By that time I knew every part in the play, including Sylvia's. It's true. And I eventually got on stage as just an extra, stuck a big moustache on, and my main wonderful moment was when Eddie Allison had a beer in his hand and he's talking about all the squatters enjoying themselves. He held the beer up and I tried to drink it. And anyway, when Chris Kempster, he was doing Nasho, when he had to go in for a weekend or a fortnight's camp, I took his place as Snowy, very briefly, in Reedy River. And eventually, when we did it again at the Wharfies Hall, 60 Sussex Street, I graduated to play Bob the Swagman, and that was a great thing for me. And I went on from there and did lots of work with New Theatre. And it was the launch by the Bush Music Club and the Bushwhackers that got me started in everything I wanted to do. And I went different ways. I got involved in theatre and got involved doing shows for children all over Australia, wrote lots of plays and books and all that. And with my wife Annette, we've now done 7,500 shows around Australia for children. But I owe it all really to those early times, and especially to Chris Kempster. But of course, the doyen was John Meredith with his work he'd done in collecting, and meeting Duke Tritton and going up to Mudgee and walking around the place with Duke and learning from him was just a great privilege and set me up for everything I've done ever since. So I honour the Bush Music Club and the Bushwhackers. Thank you very much.
How about we all give a sing on It Goes the Shears. Out on the moor, the old shearer stands, grasping his shears in his thin bony hand. Fixes his gaze on the bare belly Joe. Glory if he gets a one, he make the ringer go. Click go the shears, boys, click, click, click. Wide is his bow and his hands move quick. The ringer looks around and he's beaten by a blow. He curses the old stagger with the bare belly Joe. In the middle of the floor, with his cane by a chair, sits the boss of the board with his eyes everywhere. No swellish fleece as he comes to the screen, playing strict attention has taken off clean. Click out the shears, boys, click, click, click. Wide is his blow and his hands move quick. The ringer looks around and he's beaten by a blow, and curses the old stagger with the bare belly Joe. Well, the tar boy is there, he's waiting in the man, with his black guitar popped in his tarry hand. He sees one old sheep with a cut upon his back. That's what he's waiting for. Ta, hey, Jack! Click go the shears, boys, click, click, click. Why does he blow and his hands move quick? The ringer looks around and he's beaten by a blow. Curses the old stagger with the bare-bellied Joe. Well, the shearing is all over, we've all got our checks. Roll up your swags, we're off on the trek. First pub we come to, it's Hell have a spree. Everyone come along and come and drink with me. Lick out the shears, boys, click, click, click. Why does he blow and his hands move quick? The ringer looks around and he's beaten by a blow. He curses the old stagger with the bare-bellied Joe. He curses the old stagger with the bare-bellied Joe.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful and lovely to hear the singing there.
I lie lying in my bunk in my humble 6x8. I dreamt I saw Sam Griffiths with a darkie for a mate. I thought I met him travelling on a dreary Queensland trek, and Sam was decorated with a coloured fashion pack. I thought that it was summertime. Sam had over his eyes a little.
You've just been listening to the song Sam Griffiths, sung by Jack Luscombe in 1952. This recording is one of John Meredith's earliest, complete recording made by him of a primary source, the first of over 7,000. But John was much more than a collector of songs. Please welcome Chris Woodland to the stage to tell us more.
Thank you, Sharyn. I've called this short talk on this larger-than-life man a few comments on John Meredith. Of course, in the allocated time, we can do little more. The National Library of Australia, in conjunction with Gay Scott, has already published this book, and if anybody would like a copy, I have a few here with me. I'll see you after. If not, all you have to do is ring the National Library of Australia and get on to oral history, and they will send you a copy or you can pick one up. For now, I'll just contribute a diverse array of memories of Maher, as he was endearingly known. He was born and died in Holbrook, New South Wales. His father died when John was quite young, 7 or 8 if I recall. His father had been a violent man when drunk and treated Maher brutally. The other children were spared that trouble. As we are aware, he became known in his time as the greatest collector of Australian folk songs and music. Without him and a few others, a whole tradition would have been lost. He was also an author of about 20 books, a few more I think actually. He was a poet, reciter, musician and singer. He was good with children. He enlightened and entertained them in an easy but mature manner, treating them as sensible human beings. He was more than a collector. He was, among many things, a knowledgeable man of many cultures, varieties of music and literature. In my collection I have 6 books he produced of Japanese haikus. His weekender near Balmoral village, later to be his residence after retirement, he called Walden, after Henry David Thoreau's book of the same name. Thoreau's publication introduced the idea of passive resistance to oppose aggressive regimes, and was eventually taken up by the likes of Mahatma Gandhi. Mainly the book describes Thoreau's experiences and sustainability on his farm called Walden. Maher was greatly impressed by that publication. He also had a wonderful knowledge of botany and horticulture, collecting seeds and cuttings from far and wide over the years. A rose cutting from an Araloon graveyard in the mid-60s, seeds of the Western Currajong at Mount Gundabooka, southwest of Bourke in the early 90s, and some self-sown silky oak seedlings. I didn't realise that was a bit of alliteration. A few short months before he died, Two of those Western Currajong seedlings grew into proud trees at the Wirrambirra Native Nursery near his home at Thirlmere, where he moved to after leaving Walden. One of those little silky oak seedlings is now called the marrow tree and stands about 40 feet high in view from my office. That's 12.2 metres for the younger people in our midst. Even in his younger days, his understanding of chemistry was to a level where he was permitted to produce prescriptions when the Holbrook pharmacist went on holidays. I couldn't get away with that today. Related to his knowledge of chemistry led to an understanding of which toadstools to eat. Eventually he became very ill following a tasting of a variety of said fungus. So he was human after all. He did make a mistake once, but he survived. But he never again dabbled in toadstools. He had collected all these songs relating to the shearing industry, but did not work in a shearing shed until he was 73 years of age. That was in 1993, on our way back from Cooper Creek, when I took him to a station from my past in the Paroo River area of outback northwest New South Wales. As several of us can testify here, Rob Willis in particular, Peter Ellis, perhaps Kevin Bradley, Maher was a great travelling companion. He was a good cook, and when he and I really went bush, he would produce a variety of flavoursome meals from yellow belly, kangaroo, rabbits and goats that I would hunt. Yes, he was wonderful company when on the road. Almost perfect for one negative attribute. His snoring was unbelievably loud. He would wake fresh in the morning while his fellow traveller would have suffered a fitful night. We can vouch for that, Rob, I think. He did, yeah. Rob recorded it and put it to music. He set it to music, it's a collector's piece. He made many friends. He would also doggedly and often unreasonably refuse to tolerate some people. I learnt not to mention some names, Tim Flannery and Grant Chifley among them. The young Maher standing toe-to-toe on Sydney trains, arguing ideology to hostile commuters as he attempted to sell the Tribune, a weekly communist publication, demonstrated his dedication to the cause in those earlier years. In later life, he claimed that he was a Buddhist and was very popular with the Chinese in Thirlmere at least. It surprised me when he, as a very cultured man, refused to use chopsticks. When I queried this, he said, "Well, you don't knit with forks." He had many sayings like that. John Meredith, Maher was also an ornithologist, a thespian, photographer, confidant, colleague, correspondent and collaborator. He was a mentor, mate and much, much more. And we're still missing him. Thank you.
Someone once said, as wise as a tree full of owls. I think it was Steve Williams, and I agree with that one about Maher. I was fortunate enough to spend about 10 years on the track, the same as Woody with Maher. Probably the longest apprenticeship in history. I don't know whether they ever passed it. Chris was saying about John's other interests, and I was talking, he spent quite a bit of time at our house, and we were talking about dancing and the evolution of the bush dance. And he said, "Oh, we bought all of that stuff in there." He said, "We got it from national fitness camps in the Eureka Youth League." There you go. So we sat down and I took him out to a place called Gum Swamp near Forbes and actually filmed him and Ollie doing some of the dances from the Eureka Youth
John, where did you learn this dance?
Well, 40 odd years ago, back 1947, 48 would be, I used to belong to the Redfern branch of the Eureka Youth League. We had an old portable gramophone there with about 4 records, one of them being a Vasa Vienna called Italian Skies. And one of our members, it was Chris Kempster's sister, Elaine, I think, taught this to the group. And it was a three-part bass of Vienna, which makes it unusual. And of course the name of the tune is Italian Skies, which I won't try to remember now. This is the way it goes. Then there was waltzing to the end of the tune.
We're going to do a couple of those. The music for these I again recorded, and I found one particular one in Tasmania that he mentioned. And thanks very much to Samantha here who transcribed it. It's very easy to collect these things, but it's very hard sometimes to get them out. And this is what we're doing. And I think we have the dancers, do we? Good. There's three dancers here. There's a Wasser Vienna and a Liedenschall. That's the third one. The Chlöe is the third one. Second one. Okay. All European dancers.
I wonder if someone could flick the house light so we can see the dancers. Is that possible?
Bush Music Club dancers, Wendy, Faye, Jim and Don. Thank you very much for a lovely display.
I'm only a black box shearer, as easily can be seen. I've shone in all the famous sheds and the plains of the Riverine. I've shone in all the famous sheds, I've seen big tallies done. But somehow or other I don't know why I never became a gun. Around me boys the shears are set, I feel I fit and well. Tomorrow you'll find me at the pen when the gaffer rings the bell. With hay and spade and thumb guards fixed and both me blades pulled back. Tomorrow I go with my siding glow for a century of the sack. I've opened up the windpipe straight, I've opened behind the ears. I've shone in all the possible styles in which a man can shear. I've studied all the cuts and drives of the famous men I've met, but I never succeeded in passing up those three little figures yet. Around me boys the shears are set, I feel both fit and well. Tomorrow you'll find me at the pen when the gaffer rings the bell. With hay and spade and thumb guards fixed and both my blades pulled back. Tomorrow I go residing glow for a century of a sack. If I succeed as I hope to do, next year I intend to shear at the Woodland demonstration they hold there every year. It's there all over the colours of Michelin Co. Instead of deeming you will hear of Whittigo, we're a Joe.
Wonderful singing, thank you very much. Love to hear a bit of choir going on as well. Going back now.
You're just a lonely battler, you're waiting for a rattler. You wish to heaven you were never born. For you ran to dodge your copper, you came an awful cropper, and the skin on both your hands is cut and torn. You are tired and you are weary, lack of sleep makes your eyes bleary. The soles of both your shoes are worn right through. Your heart is sore and aching, and your back is nearly breaking, and your coat and shirt and pants have had it too. Hey ho ho bo, you are just a rolling stone. Though your pants are wearing thin, if you still can raise a grin, you're as good as any king upon his throne.
And that was Alan Scott. Alan Scott was a member of the original Bushwhackers, and he was Bill's father. So I'm just asking Bill to come to the microphone and tell us more about his dad. Thank you very much.
I've been responsible for a few truly dreadful renditions of some songs in my time, but I've also come up with a few okay ones, at least considering the amount of time I went to practicing them. Thanks to my parents, I had a completely painless musical education that stands me in good stead to this day. It began when I was going to sing-alongs in the womb and never really stopped. When we were kids, Dad had his reel-to-reel tape player and one of my inexhaustible supplies of uncles 400 or 500 miles north had a 4-track. Come early December, Mum, Dad, my brother Stephen and myself would start singing a whole bunch of Christmas carols, and once we got them right, we'd record them and send the tape off to Queensland for Grandma, Uncle Dave, Uncle Bill, Auntie Esme and all of the rest of the gang to listen to. Uncle Dave would send the tape back in January. Magnetic tape was expensive. My honorary uncle John Meredith once described recording watching the tape counter as if it was the meter in a taxi ticking over. There weren't any singers in the family up there at that time. I imagine all Uncle Bill's creative energy was being soaked up by the novels he was writing. So Uncle Dave would record a spoken word letter filling us in on the latest developments in the extended family. It was during one of these letters that we found out that Uncle Dave had more than just a mono tape machine. He hadn't taped over our singing to record his letter. Instead, he just added it as another track. At one point, he described a succession of deaths, accidents, illness, and sundry bad news to a series of rousing songs of hope and joy, lustily executed by the New South Wales Scott family in full flight. Dad with his stylish, steady tenor. Mum, who had this knack for communicating liveliness, and I'm not sure how she did this much of the time. She'd studied acting for a year or more, so there was a lot of technique and nurture going into it. But sometimes I got it, like for instance when she ended a verse with a harmony most of the way up the octave from the basic tune to give the chorus a bit more oomph. And of course, Stephen and I would fill up the soprano falsetto bandwidth, figuring we'd have to sing awful loud so that Grandma could hear it from all those miles away. Mum and Dad didn't have much to do with the folk scene during most of my brothers and my childhood because we were too hungry mouths to feed and there was a ravenous mortgage to provide for as well. I remember one weekend afternoon when Dad had a bit of time to spare between overtime and night shift. He picked up the concertina and ran through a sailor song. Halfway into the second verse, Stephen decided to lose it in a big way and tell Mum he wasn't going for his nap, and he ended up howling, racking sobs, drawing ragged breaths, lying on his stomach, beating the floor with his fists. And Dad, unperturbed, sang his way through the scene, although he did eventually change the words of the chorus from "Don't Cry Little Fishy" to "Don't Cry Little Stevie." I'm really proud of the songs Mum and Dad nurtured over the years and fascinated by the different versions of them that I've heard from what's now several generations of performers, from the really early stuff held in the National Library, collected by Dad, John Meredith and others, through the Electric Bushworkers, Jason and Chlöe, and the amazing lineup of performers who just keep on coming. And as far as the different versions are concerned, I mean, you got the Banks of Condamine, it can be tragic or comic. Frank the Poet's Moreton Bay can be a lament or a bitter rant. Which tune for Waltzing Matilda, Who'll Be a Soldier for Marlborough, or the Queensland version. And how maudlin can you get a little fishy to sound at 3 a.m. after way too much grog? And thanks to everyone for recognising Mum's and Dad's contribution. And I think we'll have another song. Is it the Mossvale Train? Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, well, I'm standing on Campbelltown Station, waiting for the Mossvale train, when this bloke comes out with a microphone and he says it's been cancelled again. Well, he says it's not his problem that we can't get our ride. The train pulled into Minto and committed suicide. Well, he says he's ordered buses to take us on our way, and now he thinks we should be grateful. Yeah, that's what I heard him say. And now we're lurching down the freeway, watching Sylvester Stallone on video. I hope we get to Mossvale before the shops all close. There's this bloke on the seat here beside me. He was going for a job interview, but by the time we get to Picton, all his chances of employment are through. And my wife waits for me in Barrel. She'll be going off her brain, staring down the railway track, and there won't be any train. Go off your brain, Chlöe. word of advice. Well, if you're standing on Campbelltown Station, you're waiting for the 2:31, and some clown comes out with a microphone and he tells you the train won't run. Well, you tell him it is his problem. It's a problem for all of us. Tell him you want your train back. You don't want his stupid bus. You'll have your ticket money back and bloody walk. Stand up for yourself. Remember, they're the railways you own. Or you'll be lurching down the freeway. Oh, you're hoping to get there soon. With the money they spent on the freeway, they'd build a railway to the moon. They'd build a railway to the moon. All out, all change. Thank you very much. Can I get a show of hands out there? Who has read Time Means Tucker? How many people out? That's a very disappointing number. It is the best book in the world. Time Means Tucker was written by Duke Tritton, and as an aside, but I think an important one, a friend of mine has just taken the time to put Time Means Tucker into a couple of ebook formats, and you can download it and read it because it's out of print by a long way, and you won't find it. But please get it and read it, because I think it is one of the really great books. It certainly was for me when I read it. Duke, I won't be able to do any kind of justice to Duke in a couple of short minutes, but I'll say read that book. And I'll just mention that the book deals with the time that Duke spent when he was out with his swag, aiming and eventually becoming a gun shearer, or close to anyway. Duke couldn't cook, and he couldn't dance. If you just assume he can do everything else, then you've just about got him, I think. He built fences. He sang for his supper. He busked. He was a station hand. He was a pest poisoner. He was a powder monkey, in particular on the Sandy Hollow line. If anyone's ever heard John Dengate recite the Sandy Hollow line, then you will never forget it. And he was a shearer as well, and he became a very good shearer. I think he described himself as not the quickest, but a very clean shearer, and someone who would always be asked back, which I think was a badge of pride. Duke did all these things. Some of the fences he built are still standing, including through some very rugged country, through the Warrumbungles. And he also sang, as I say, and he sang some very important songs at a very important time, I think, for the Bush Music Club. At least that's my understanding, is that when he sang those 6 or 7 songs for John Meredith, that it, I don't know what percentage it added to the repertoire of Bush songs, but it was considerable. The Great Northern Line, Guriana War, The Shores of Botany Bay, these fantastic songs that Duke knew. And he sang them really well. Guriana, my kind of understanding of those songs, the first thing I remember is that, Jojo was a man from Tucson, Arizona, but I wasn't. And Sweet Home wasn't Chicago, it was Tottenham. All the names of the places on the radio were pictures in my head, but the names in Duke's song, I knew how they smelt, I knew how they tasted, I knew the people that lived there. When he sang Good Old Reeds of Tabratong, I knew them. It's made a big difference to me, and his singing is very powerful. And I will do Guriana War now, and I just urge you to come and see me if you want to grab the links to read Time Means Tucker. I promise you, it's a lazy afternoon. You got the time. It's a great book. When Duke sang this song in particular, evidently he was quite keen that you sang with a bit of venom. You've got to put a bit of venom into this kind of song. I think you know the chorus.
Oh my, I never saw before the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana War.
And I fancied I could cheer. I shore for Rouse at Gunterwong and always missed the spear. I shore for Nicholas Bailey, and I'll declare to you that on his pure merinos I could always struggle through. But it's oh my, I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana Wall. Few people singing, some looking confused. Please give it a go. Well, I'm shearing down the Bogan as far as Dandaloo for good old Rita Tabratongs. I've often cut a few at Henry and Quambone and even Wingadee. I could close my shears at 6 o'clock with a quiet century, but it's oh my, I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana Wall. I'm sure for Bob McMaster down at the Rock Gial Creek, and I could always dish him up with 30 score a week. I shore at Terramunga Mine and on the Talbury Gar, and I ran McDermott for the cobbler when we shore at Buckham Bar. But it's oh my, I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana Wall. Well, I've been shearing on the Golden side and down at Douglas Park, where every day it was wool away and Toby did his work. I shore for General Stewart, whose tomb's out on the mountain. The sprees I've had with Scrubby Jack was more than I could count. 2, 3, 4. But it's oh my, I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana Wall. I've been shearing at Chigara. Well, I'll never forget the name. That's where Gardner robbed the escort that from the Lachlan came. I shore for Bob Fitzgerald down at the Davy Rocks. McPhillamy, you Charlton, and you Mr. Henry Cox. But it's oh my, I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana Wall. Oh, but that was in the bad old days. You might have heard them say that Skelly Corn from Bathurst rode to Sydney in a day.
He did, he carried the horse.
Didn't make it. He walked half the way. But now I'm broken mouthed, then my shearing's at an end. And although they call me whalebone, I was never known to bend. But it's oh my, I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana Wall. Well, I was shorn in every woolshed, from the Barwon to the sea, but I got speared at Guriana Wall before I'd barbered 3. But it's by the living Joseph I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana Wall, and it spared me flaming days. Well, I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana, oh my, I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana, oh my, I never saw before. Well, the way we had to knuckle down at Guriana. Too tricky.
Thank you to Jason, Chlöe and the Bush Music Club Orchestra Ensemble. 58 years is a long time to gather memories and remember when. A lot of memories have been brought out today. But we've got someone else who wants to tell us a bit more, and that's Frank Maher. Please welcome Frank to the stage to tell us a bit more about the old days.
There were other people around before me that could tell this tale better than me. One of the things I'd like to concur with Sylvia Salisbury, she said that Reedy River and the Bushwhackers complemented each other. John Armstrong, who was the producer of the early Reedy Rivers, said to me that Reedy River made the Bushwhackers and the Bushwhackers made Reedy River, and that was pretty accurate. I first went to the Saturday Sing-About night held at the YWCA on the corner of Wentworth Avenue and Liverpool Street. I worked with Alan Scott at the PMG, and he invited me to come. That was in 1955, and as a result I started going every Tuesday night to the workshops, which in those days were held at Nelson's Point. We rented a room from the Fellowship of Australian Writers, and I usually sat in the corner and sang. I was eventually approached by Gay and Helen to join the club, as I'd been coming along for more than a year. I joined in 1956. I think it was about the same time as Stu, but I could be wrong. Tuesday nights consisted of going around the room and everybody contributing an item, singing, playing, or maybe a poem. Then we'd go to the latest Sing About magazine and learn some of the new songs. After interval, there would be a request for songs from earlier Sing Abouts magazines and also a bit of bush dancing. After we had moved with the Fellowship of Australian Writers to rooms in Clarence Street in the city, Noreen Grunsey joined us on Tuesday nights and taught us some of the new dances. Coffee at Reppins in George Street became traditional end of the night. The beauty of Tuesday workshops was that they were on every Tuesday and not once a month, so you didn't have to think which Tuesday you had to save up to go to the Bush Music Club. Just turn up, when I did for many years until the move to Marrickville. Thank you.
Another lot of memories comes from Dale Dengate. Dale is unable to be here today, but taking her place is Margaret Waters. Please welcome Margaret Waters with some more memories. Thank you.
Obviously, there's going to be a bit of duplication among these memories. So this is what Dale wrote. As a keen bushwalker in the early 1960s, I found the Bush Music Club Sing About songsters in youth hostels and met a few of the club members. They invited me to their meetings, which were held on Tuesday evenings near Wynyard Station. The format was similar to Methodist fellowship meetings, where you sat around and sang songs. A welcome difference was that at the Bush Music Club meetings, we had portraits of well-known Australian writers such as Henry Lewison and Mary Gilmore looking down on us as we sang, danced or played. There were many keen dancers, nimble dancers, often led by Noreen Grunsey and John Meredith. Most of the musicians were older men who played concertinas and accordions, except for Frank Maher and Jamie Carlin, who were closer to my generation. Frank played the bones and Jamie played the concertina by ear and didn't need sheet music, which I found amazing. In 1961, I encouraged another young teacher from my school to accompany me to the club. He was John Dengate, who was learning to play the guitar and had already written lots of songs about his experiences in Menindee and in the National Service. Alan Scott, Merrow and others encouraged John to bring along a new song every week and to use traditional tunes. And John continues to this day to trace the political history of Australia as an unapologetic supporter of the worker and the union movement and as a commentator on the follies of pollies. You'll find these available after the event and in the book at the festival shop. We often went away with the concert party to places in the bush like Gulgong, Karkor and Chuina, playing and singing on street corners or on the back of trucks. Everything was much more make-do, and I used to wear a long skirt, which was really a curtain. I especially recall Pam and Brian Lachlan. Brian was a very lively fellow who played the bones and Lagerphone in Reedy River in 1954. He was a great showman on the bones. Brian worked in the printing trade and told hilarious stories of his boss, Frank Packer, who used to chayak him about his work for the Communist Party and the Union. Brian and Pam brought up a large family in a small workers' cottage in Rozelle. And there was an occasion when Brian was being bundled into the back of a paddy wagon after a peace march. Although Pam was 8 months pregnant, she chased the wagon, pounding on it, shouting, "You can't take him away. He has to come home to look after the children, or I'll bring them all down to the cop shop." After the first National Folk Festival in Sydney, the Port Jackson Festival in 1972, John and I had a number of folk from Melbourne staying with us at our home in Glebe. They all went to a production of Reedy River at the New Theatre on a Sunday evening, and when they came home, I was kept busy making pots of tea. Those were the days when all the pubs closed on Sunday, so there was no grog. But the old lady next door felt the singing, music and laughter around midnight was too noisy, so she called the police. It was probably Brian, who was playing the bones while being upside down on our lounge, who had us all laughing, that caused the late night ruckus. However, when the police arrived, they were apologetic, as they said they couldn't hear any noise from the street, but not because it was the only house with a light on. They declined a cup of tea and went away. Glebe in those days was known as a very rough suburb, and the pokies from Melbourne were thrilled as they could dine out on the story of being in a house in Glebe drinking cups of tea when it was raided by the police and probably ASIO. Pam and Brian were keen dancers, so we were all saddened when Brian had an asthma attack at the Bush Music dance celebrating the end of the Vietnam War. He died on the way to hospital. Indeed, as one looks back over the early decades of the Bush Music Club, one recalls larger-than-life characters, some of whom are no longer with us, with a range of mixed emotions. So that's the memories from Dale Dengate. In the shop, John's new book of songs and a reproduction of this one from 30 years ago. And I'd like to introduce now Dave Johnson, who is going to read some reminiscences of Jamie Carlin.
Thank you, Margaret. Thanks very much. Yes, I've been asked to just present some information about Jamie Carlin. And I'm honoured to present this because Jamie Carlin, I owe great debt to Jamie Carlin for his musical generosity. When I first went to the Bush Music Club in about 1971, Jamie was the musical anchorman of the club. His repertoire covered all the songs in the Sing About Songster, all the songs in the Penguin Songster, and all the dance music we used. And he carried it all in his head. And later I had the privilege of working with him in the Reedy River Bushmen, playing at many shows, picking up not only the music, but a great love for it. The following is a collection of reminiscences derived from his memory and his diaries. And the concert party and other entertainment groups figure prominently. So now, largely in Jamie's own words, with a few asides from me to put things into perspective. In 1954, Reedy River was still playing to packed houses every weekend with the Bushwhackers band led by John Meredith. My father had taken me to see Reedy River in February as a 17th birthday, and I cannot recollect having ever been so impressed by such rollicking music. Within a week, I knew every song by heart. With a few friends at Granville, I began practicing songs and instrumental arrangements. I built a lagerphone and with mouth organ and tenor and treble recorders, we practiced various bush ballads, Cobb and Co., Dennis O'Reilly, The Old Bark Hut, Click Go the Shears. Personnel, Max McDermott, Bill Berry and Dick Fitzgerald and myself. And in addition to this, I joined Ken Hanson's group, the West Sydney Singers, singing folk songs in 4, 6 and 8-part arrangements, particularly from Volume 1 of Ron Edwards' Bandicoot Ballads. Around about October, a foolscap circular headed the BMC was circulated. It set out the intentions of several of the Bushwhackers band to form an organisation of the many friends. The newly formed Bush Music Club met on Friday nights at the Video Studios, Castlereagh Street, and my first visit was quite soon after the foundation. I became a regular attender. It was the intention of the BMC to encourage the formation of small bands in various suburbs capable of doing work similar to that of the Bushwhackers. About that time, the Australian Folklore Society was functioning strongly, with John Meredith as secretary. A monthly meeting was held on a Saturday afternoon at the YMCA, where tapes and records were played and notes and discussions exchanged. It was at these meetings that I first met Duke Tritton, Joe Cashmere, Sally Sloane, key providers of our folklore. meetings were normally followed by a party at one of the members' homes. In March 1955, New Theatre revived Reedy River for 2 weeks, and I took part in my first theatrical performance. Also in March 55, 3 BMC members, Alan Scott, Patricia Burke and myself, played at a social at Sutherland School of Arts. This was probably the first attendance of a group on behalf of the Bush Music Club other than the Bushwhackers. Following this event, the group met for practice at Joy and Claude Durst's home in North Sydney and later at the home of Mattern Harry Glendinning. And Victorians, particularly those with associations with the VFMC, would remember Joy Durst. She moved to Melbourne and became a founder of that venerable club. Just briefly, some of the features of this period. A film night showing Captain Thunderbolt, the New England bushranger. In 55, the ABC commissioned a series of radio programs. Nancy Keesing apparently wrote these scripts. She was one of the key members of the Folklore Society, and she published, was joint editor of the collection of old bush songs that came out in 1957. The shows were Songs of the Shearers, A Poor Convict in Chains, and On the Wallaby Track. And that was really good to see the ABC showing an interest in getting this music out. It was part of that exposure that the Bushwhackers had created around this music. In September, the first Australian Folklore Festival was held. The event was a resounding success with a program of traditional local singers. The event received such a lot of favourable publicity in the newspapers and even in People magazine, which devoted pages to it. I'll jump a few things here. In November, 11th of November, Ned Kelly Night was held to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Ned Kelly. And I think the songbook, Songs of the Kelly Country, came from that period. In July, it was decided that a magazine would be a desirable feature of the Bush Music Club. So in November, a function called Sing About was held to raise funds for the publication. As far as I can determine, this was the first occasion this name was used. Sing About continued as the magazine of the Bush Music Club until 1967. Just a last thing here, the BMC had an active social calendar, including events, the dances and the club nights and so on, but events like Mystery Picnic, where destination was known to but a few. A bus was hired, mystified folk were packed aboard, and perhaps Gary Beach or somewhere like that, where good food, good company and good music were enjoyed by all. And out of this social activities of the Bush Music Club came many, many romances. So we had Frank and Anne Maher, we had the Dengates came out of it, Jamie and Rhonda Colin, and the list could just go on and on. So there's probably thousands of people over the years. So that's, again, thanks to Jamie Colin for those memories from his diaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, for that. Poems and songs, poetry, yarns and stories are all a part of the Bush Music Club part of the Bush Music Club. And Chris Woodland has been collecting songs, poems for many years. So please welcome him to the stage to tell us more about that. Thank you.
I won't talk much about collecting, but I did collect this short poem with the National Library's recorder back in '95 from Ross Wallace. Ross Wallace he's still around, but he's much older than I am, which means he's a very lucky man. And but he used to have a property up near the Queensland border near Hungerford. This poem is about a chap he knew when he was younger, who was an older man, and he and his family had a property, one near Cunnamulla and one near Thargomindah, which is much, much west. Anyway, old Ross wrote this, and he just called it Charlie Kane, and it's about when motor vehicles replaced horses in the outback. Now, Charlie Kane in his younger days bought a Model T. With this he found he could get to town as quick could be. If he left Cunnamulla early and everything went all right, he'd get to Wethoba before too late that night. And many's the tale he had to tell at that early motoring time, and I'll pass on to you, and I'm sure it's true, just one that comes to mind. He was heading out to Wethoba in that long and dusty drag when he overtook a young bloke walking and carrying his swag. Charlie bid him the time of day and offered him a ride. Throw your swag up on the back and hop up at my side. This he did, and away they went, making a merry pace. But Charlie noticed this young bloke had a strange look on his face. They came to a gate at Dinner for Downs, and Charlie stopped the Ford at the gate and looked at this bloke and said with a smile, "How about opening it, mate?" "Open the gate yourself," he said. "I'm no servant of yours. I can't see any reason why I should be doing your chores." So Charlie opened the gate himself and they continued on their way. It was 15 miles to the next gate, but Charlie had nothing to say. But when they finally reached that gate, he said, "You'd better get out of here, son, for you've a long way to walk and no time to talk, because I threw your swag off at the last one."
Thank you, Chris. Song publications is another important element to the Bush Music Club, and we'd like to welcome Bob Bolton, who's going to sing Cain Killed Abel. Cain Killed Abel is the first song of the first edition of Sing About. Thank you.
Well, there it is. We've finally become a club, finally got out of publication, and here on the right through this book, Butte Songs to Sing, and the very first one is on page 3. It says, Merv Lilly, who's a member that we all should know, is a sailor, but he reckoned that he not working as hard as he could be if he'd stayed in the cane country. And the song's called Cain Killed Abel, and every second line is "Stow it and top it and load it, my boys," and I'd like to hear you all sing along in that chorus. I was a cane cutter, but now I'm at sea. Stow it and chop it and load it, me boys. Once Cain killed Abel, but it won't kill me. Stow it and chop it and load it, me boys. There was an old seaman who sang this refrain. Stow it and chop it and load it, me boys. Then stood to the bar and he filled up again. Stow it and chop it and load it, me boys. I rose every morning about 3:30. Stow it and chop it and load it, me boys. The cook, my breakfast, my dinner and tea. Stow it and top it and load it, me boys. I worked very hard until I went to sea. Stow it and chop it and load it, me boys. Once Cain killed Abel, but it won't kill me. Stow it and chop it and load it, my boys. I was a cane cutter, but now I'm at sea. Stow it and chop it and load it, me boys. Once Cain killed Abel, but it won't kill me. Stow it and chop it and load it, me boys.
Thank you, everybody. Just before we close down, apparently there's a lagerphone competition. They're trying to get into the Guinness Book of Records with the most number of players or something like that. I think you need to take your earphones with you. Earplugs, rather. Yeah, thank you. 6 o'clock tomorrow night. I'm not sure where it's going to be. It's anyway. Good luck to them. That's what I say. Nothing like the old rabbiter's gift, the lagerphone. Now we have to close now. Come to our end. I'd like to thank the Union Choir for that magnificent rendition of 1891, one of the most powerful songs I've ever heard. And of course, to everybody on stage and everybody who has walked up, I want to thank them very, very much, and I want you all to remember that in 2 years' time it will be a real extravaganza, the 60th birthday of the Bush Music Club. Thank you all for coming.
A drum and ship, my companions lay asleep. There wasn't a star to illuminate the sky. I was dreaming, I suppose, for my eyes were partly closed when a very strange procession passed me by. First they came a kangaroo with a flag of blanket blue. I'd linger and decided for a mate. They were travelling mighty fast and they shouted as they passed, we'll have to jog along, it's getting late. Pelican and a crane, I come in from off the plain to amuse the company with a Highland fling. And dear old Wendy gave the orchestra its hold on. I was dreaming, I suppose, of these entertaining shows. It never crossed my mind I was asleep until the boss beneath the cart woke me up with such a start, yelling dreamy, where the hell are all the sheep? Well, the tar boy is there, he's waiting in the man, with his black guitar pot in his tarry hand. He sees one old sheep with a cut upon his back, that's what he's waiting for, tar, hey Jack. Lick out the shiz, boys, click, click, click. Why does he blow and his hands move quick? The ringer looks around and he's beaten by a blow, curses the old stagger with the bare-bellied Joe. Well, the shearing is all over, we've all got our checks. Roll up your swags, we're off on the trek. First pub we come to, it's Hell have a spree. Everyone come along and come and drink with me. Lick out the shiz, boys, click, click.